I feel jealous that a girl kissed my boyfriend and I wished he handled it differently. How can I help him handle uncomfortable situations better? I, a 28-year-old woman, find myself battling an uncomfortable mix of emotions lately, a situation that leaves me questioning the dynamics of my relationship. Jealousy is a feeling I rarely experience, yet here I am, trying to navigate through it. A girl kissed my boyfriend, a 27-year-old man, and while I trust him completely, I can't shake the wish that he had handled it differently. It's not just about what happened, it's about how he responds to these kinds of situations. It makes me wonder, how can I help him handle uncomfortable situations better? And how do I reconcile my own emotions in the process? My boyfriend is, in every sense of the phrase, a nice guy. He is the kind of man who greets strangers with genuine warmth, remembers the names of his co-workers' children, and volunteers to help neighbors move heavy furniture, even when he's exhausted. He carries kindness in his every gesture and word. It's one of the reasons I fell for him so quickly. When we started dating at the beginning of the year, his gentleness felt like a balm to my soul, a refreshing contrast to the selfishness I had encountered in previous relationships. But as time went on, I began to notice a pattern in his interactions with others. My admiration for his kindness was shadowed by a nagging worry: was he too nice? I started questioning whether his desire to avoid conflict, to please everyone, came at a cost his own boundaries. I couldn't help but wonder if he would be able to stand up for himself or for me when it mattered most. Would he find the courage to say no if someone crossed the line? He's aware of this tendency. He's admitted to me, on more than one occasion, that he struggles with boundaries. I hate disappointing people, he once told me, his voice laced with frustration. I don't know why, but I feel awful saying no. It's easier to just go along with things. His honesty was endearing, but it also left me concerned. I, too, can be a people pleaser, but I don't think it consumes me the way it seems to consume him. For him, it's almost instinctual, like breathing. He avoids confrontation at all costs, even when it's necessary. Sometimes, his inability to assert himself spills into our relationship in ways that leave me feeling exposed. There have been moments in social situations when, in an effort to appease others or save face, he has thrown me under the bus. It's never malicious, he would never intentionally hurt me, but it's still humiliating. Once, at a dinner with his friends, someone teased him about how much time we spend together. Instead of brushing it off, he laughed nervously and said, "Yeah, she's a little clingy sometimes." I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment, my chest tightening. I wasn't clingy, I simply valued the time we spent together. But in that moment, he had chosen the comfort of a laugh over my feelings. These incidents are rare, but they stick with me. They make me wonder if his inability to set boundaries with others will eventually erode the foundation of our relationship. How can we build something strong and secure if he can't stand up for us? This past weekend, he attended a wedding I couldn't join him for. It wasn't that I didn't want to go, I love weddings. The joy, the love, the fleeting magic of the day, it's something I always look forward to. But life sometimes gets in the way, and with work piling up and commitments I couldn't shirk, I had to sit this one out. He reassured me, with that warm, earnest smile of his, that he'd miss me and wouldn't stay too long. Yet, even as I waved him off that afternoon, a small knot of unease twisted in my stomach. He called me the next day to tell me about the wedding. At first, his voice was light and animated as he recounted the ceremony, the speeches, and the open bar that everyone had apparently taken full advantage of. I smiled at his enthusiasm, imagining him in his suit, looking handsome and slightly out of place among a sea of more flamboyant personalities. But then, his tone shifted. There was hesitation, a crack in his usually breezy demeanor, and I knew something was coming. "There was this girl," he began, his words careful and deliberate. "She kept flirting with me." The knot in my stomach tightened. I didn't interrupt, I wanted to hear everything. He explained that she had been persistent throughout the evening, her laughter a little too loud, her touches a little too frequent. He assured me that he had done nothing to encourage her, but I could tell from the way he described it that he hadn't done much to discourage her either. My mind raced, conjuring up images of this girl, confident and brazen, leaning into him with a coy smile. It wasn't jealousy exactly, at least, that's what I told myself. It was something deeper, a fear rooted in his inability to assert boundaries. But what he said next was what truly unsettled me. Toward the end of the night, another girl, someone in an open relationship, came over. She sat on my knee and said she missed me. Then she kissed me on the cheek. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The mental image was sharp and vivid, an uninvited intruder in my thoughts. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice steady but strained. He hesitated. "I didn't know what to do," he admitted. "I was drunk, and I felt awkward." Awkward. That word reverberated in my mind, sparking a whirlwind of emotions. Awkward was what you felt when a stranger blocked your way in a grocery aisle, not when someone crossed a boundary in such a blatant, disrespectful way. I could feel my chest tighten, a mix of frustration and sadness bubbling to the surface. He wasn't a cheater, I knew that in my heart. But his niceness, his inability to push back, left him vulnerable to situations like this. And it left me struggling to understand where I stood. I tried to keep my tone neutral as I pressed further. "Did you move? Did you say anything? Did you go find her boyfriend?" "No," he admitted, his voice small. "I just froze. I felt really uncomfortable, but I didn't want to make a scene." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. He felt uncomfortable, but what about me? What about how I would feel hearing this, knowing that he had allowed this girl to invade our relationship's sacred boundaries, even in such a seemingly minor way? It wasn't about the kiss on the cheek, it was about the fact that he hadn't stood up for himself, for us. I knew he didn't mean to hurt me. That wasn't who he was. But his instinct to avoid conflict, to prioritize someone else's comfort over his own and mine, was a pattern that was beginning to wear on me. It wasn't the first time I'd seen this happen. He had always been too nice, too accommodating, and while it was part of what made him the man I loved, it was also what made moments like these so painful. The jealousy I felt wasn't born out of distrust, it was born out of helplessness. I knew that, sober or not, he wouldn't have actively reciprocated her advances. But I also knew that his passivity, his tendency to freeze in the face of discomfort, made it easier for others to cross lines he didn't have the courage to enforce. That night, I lay awake, replaying his words over and over. I could picture him at the wedding, the alcohol loosening his inhibitions but not his discomfort. I could see him sitting there, a mix of politeness and panic etched on his face, unsure of how to extract himself from the situation. I could feel the weight of his hesitation, his fear of confrontation, and the toll it was taking on me. This wasn't just about a girl at a wedding. This was about a pattern, one that I wasn't sure I could keep ignoring. How many more times would I have to hear stories like this? How many more times would I have to reassure myself that his kindness wasn't a flaw but a feature of who he was? And how long could I keep pushing down the frustration that came with loving someone who couldn't stand up for themselves or for me? I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. "Did you move or say anything to her?" I asked again, hoping maybe he'd realize how important this was to me, how much his answer mattered. "No," he said softly, almost as though he were ashamed. I felt uncomfortable, and I didn't want to make it awkward. There it was again, that word, awkward. As though that was the ultimate sin, a thing to be avoided at all costs. It stung to hear it, not because I didn't understand his discomfort but because it felt like his hesitation was weighted more heavily toward preserving someone else's feelings or maybe his own sense of ease than protecting my trust, my peace of mind. I could feel the familiar pang of unease creep in, not because I doubted his love for me but because I questioned his ability to handle situations like these with strength and clarity. And yet, despite all this, I trusted him. That was never the issue. My boyfriend, kind and loyal to a fault, wasn't the type to stray. He didn't have it in him to betray someone he loved. But this wasn't about fidelity, it was about boundaries or the lack of them, and how those gaps left me feeling vulnerable in our relationship. I tried to frame my next words carefully, wanting to express myself without hurting him. "I know you'd never cheat on me," I said, keeping my voice even, though my chest felt tight with emotion. "But it's not about that. It's about how you handle situations like this. It makes me uncomfortable, not because I don't trust you, but because I feel like you don't protect us when someone crosses the line." He nodded slowly, his expression a mixture of guilt and frustration. "I know," he admitted. "I should have done something. I should have pushed her away or gotten up, but in the moment, I just froze. I didn't know what to do." His honesty was both disarming and infuriating. I could tell he meant it, that he regretted his inaction, but the fact that this wasn't the first time he'd felt frozen in the face of confrontation made it harder for me to brush it off. I wanted to be patient with him, I truly did. I loved him for his gentleness, for his empathy, for the way he always saw the best in people. But love, as I was learning, didn't mean ignoring the cracks that formed in the foundation of a relationship. It meant facing them together and figuring out whether they could be repaired. I don't know how to explain it," I said after a moment, my voice tinged with frustration despite my efforts to remain calm. "It's not about the girl, it's about you. It feels like you care more about not upsetting someone else than about how I feel in these situations. Even when that person is clearly doing something wrong." His face fell, and for a moment, I regretted my words. I hated seeing him like this, burdened by guilt, but I couldn't keep swallowing my own discomfort for the sake of sparing his. That was the irony of our dynamic. He avoided confrontation to keep the peace, while I was left holding the weight of everything unspoken. "I do care about how you feel," he said earnestly, his eyes meeting mine. "I hate that this upset you. I don't always know what the right thing to do is in the moment." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "But that's the thing. You shouldn't have to think so hard about it. Someone sits on your knee, someone crosses a line, you stand up, you say no. It's not about making a scene, it's about showing that you respect yourself and us enough to set a boundary." He nodded again, his brow furrowed in thought. "You're right," he said quietly. "I need to be better about this. I hate that I let you down." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he could change, that he could learn to stand his ground and protect the boundaries of our relationship. But a part of me worried that this was something deeper, something tied to who he was at his core. It wasn't just about me. His inability to say no extended to his friends, his family, even strangers. I'd seen him agree to things he didn't want to do just to avoid disappointing someone. I'd seen him take on responsibilities that weren't his to bear, apologizing for things that weren't his fault. And while I admired his heart, his generosity, it hurt to see him struggle like this. It hurt to see him let people take advantage of his kindness, to see him prioritize their feelings over his own and, by extension, over mine. It hurt because I knew he was capable of so much more. "I love you," I said finally, my voice soft but firm. "And I know you're a good person. But this is something we need to work on together. Because it's not just about what happened at the wedding. It's about how you handle situations like these, how it affects us. And I need to know that you are willing to put in the effort to change." He looked at me, his expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "I am," he said. "I promise." I wanted to believe him. For now, I decided, that would have to be enough. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about that night at the wedding. It wasn't even about the girl who had kissed him on the cheek or the ones who flirted with him. This was about a deeper pattern, one that had quietly woven itself into the fabric of our relationship. His inability to say no, to assert himself, to draw a line in the sand. These weren't isolated moments. They were pieces of a bigger picture, one that made me question not just him, but us. I couldn't help but reflect on the countless times I'd seen this play out. It wasn't always with strangers or acquaintances. Sometimes, it was with his own friends or family. There was the time his sister asked him to drop everything and help her move, despite him having a packed schedule. He didn't complain, didn't even flinch, just said yes and rearranged his entire day to accommodate her. Or the time his boss called him on a weekend, asking him to work on a project that wasn't his responsibility. He agreed, even though we had plans, and spent hours hunched over his laptop while I sat alone, trying not to feel resentful. It wasn't that I didn't admire his willingness to help, it was one of the reasons I fell in love with him. But there was a difference between being kind and being a doormat. And it hurt to see the people closest to him exploit that kindness, knowingly or unknowingly. It hurt even more to see him accept it, as though he didn't deserve better. As though he believed that his value was tied to how much he could give, how much he could bend, how much he could sacrifice. I love him, I whispered to myself one night, lying awake in bed. The words felt both comforting and heavy, a truth I couldn't escape. I did love him. I loved his warmth, his generosity, the way he made me feel seen and cherished. But love alone didn't solve problems. It didn't erase the frustration that simmered beneath the surface when I watched him let others take advantage of him. It didn't quiet the doubts that crept in when I thought about the future we were trying to build together. Could I be patient with him? That was the question that haunted me. How long could I wait for him to change? How long could I stand by, watching him struggle to assert himself, hoping that one day he would find the strength to set boundaries not just for my sake, but for his own? I didn't have an answer. And that scared me. One evening, after yet another small incident where he had gone out of his way to please someone at his own expense, I decided to talk to him. Really talk. Not just about what had happened at the wedding or the situations that had come up since, but about the bigger picture, the pattern that was eroding the trust and balance in our relationship. Can we sit down for a minute? I asked, my voice soft but serious. He looked up from his phone, sensing the weight in my tone, and nodded. We sat together on the couch, and I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without brushing it off or apologizing right away, okay? He nodded again, his expression earnest. Of course. What's on your mind? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. I love you. I love the person you are, the way you care about others, the way you're always willing to help. But I feel like this part of you, the part that struggles to say no, is starting to take a toll on us. I see how hard it is for you to set boundaries, and I see how much it hurts you when people take advantage of that. But it also hurts me. It hurts because I know you deserve better, and it hurts because sometimes it feels like you are prioritizing other people's comfort over mine. He didn't interrupt, which I appreciated. His eyes stayed locked on mine, his expression a mixture of concern and vulnerability. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad, I continued. I'm saying it because I want us to be better. I want you to be better for yourself, not just for me. I want you to feel confident in standing up for yourself, in saying no when something doesn't feel right. And I need to know that this is something you are willing to work on. Because if it's not, I don't know if I can keep waiting and hoping for things to change. The words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. I hadn't meant to make it sound like an ultimatum, but in a way, it was. I needed to set my own boundaries, too. I couldn't keep pushing down my feelings, pretending everything was okay, while resentment quietly grew between us. He took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. I hear you, he said finally, his voice low but steady. And you're right. I know I have a problem with this. I've known it for a long time, and I hate that it's affecting us. I don't want to lose you because of this. His words were sincere, but I needed more than promises. I needed action. What are you going to do about it? I asked gently, but firmly. How are you going to work on this? He paused, thinking. I don't know, he admitted. But I want to figure it out. Maybe I need to talk to someone about it, like a therapist. Or maybe we can come up with some strategies together. But I promise, I'm going to try. I felt a flicker of hope at his response, tempered by the knowledge that change wouldn't happen overnight. This was going to take time and effort, and there were no guarantees. But for now, I was willing to take that step forward with him. As we sat there, the weight of the conversation settling around us, I realized that love is a choice, an active, ongoing decision to stay, to fight, to grow. And for now, I was choosing him. I was choosing us. I love you, I said softly, reaching for his hand. And I'm here. But we have to work on this together. He nodded, his grip tightening around mine. I love you, too. And I will. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. And sometimes, that's enough.